Okay, let's walk through uh, taking an idea through a process to output to laser cutter. First thing I'm going to suggest is that you start a new document and that your new document either be the size of the material that you're using or the size of the bed of the laser cutter. I recommend the size of the laser cutter, which is 24 by 18. So 24 wide and 18 high in your landscape orientation, and that is inches. This is going to be important when we go to make sure that the scale of what you're cutting fits what you want it to be. Once you create that, you have a large area that you're working with. If you hit Command R, you'll see your rulers. Now, my rulers here are also in inches. As I zoom in, you can see my rulers at the edge. Go here, right? So there's a 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch, an inch. So this is a little bit bigger on the screen than it is in reality. This is a little bit closer to 100%, okay? So we have some options for that. And even though I went to view actual size doesn't mean that each inch is an inch. So you can make that fit about what's going to look right for you. Okay, so that's just getting started. Now let's say we want to, I'm going to go up into the corner here, give us a good size to work with. I want to create the shape that I would like to cut out. Now I'm actually going to do this with the paintbrush tool. And I want to make sure that I am only using a stroke and not a fill. So this fill is white currently, and I actually want it to be nothing. So we will see what that means. So with my stroke, right, I have just the stroke and no fill on that. Now, that is not a particularly wide brush stroke. So I'm going to keep messing around. There we go. Maybe that's a little bit wider with what I'm working with. Okay. Now, my selection tool up here in the corner will let me click and drag over all of those and kind of get rid of them so that I can work with what I want. And back to the brush tool. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that I can make it kind of messy and it will smooth it out for me, which is kind of cool, right? And if I click on it with my selection tool, I can see that that's the line I drew and my stroke is that wide, right? If I want to then change that a little bit, I can click on the direct selection tool and click on one of those nodes, and then I can move that around. So that's using the brush tool to get some interesting curves in Illustrator. Okay. Now, perhaps for our purposes today, we would be better off, instead of using the brush tool, which you could do, using the shape tool. And I am going to play with ellipses because I like curves. You could work with any of the tools. And again, I want to make sure I have no fill and just a stroke, and we'll play with that in a minute. But and once I make that, I'm going to go into my stroke and make my stroke a little bit, 4 millimeters is kind of wide, 2 millimeters is not bad for the width that you might want to cut out. Now, we can then do some fun overlaps of shapes. Let's see what we get here. And we're going to need a little one at the top. That's going to be the one we're going to put our earring finding into if we're making earrings. And the other thing I might suggest is right now all of my circles, this looks kind of messy, they're all exactly the same width. So now if I make one of them 3 millimeters wide, it's a little bit thicker line, and maybe go back to the selection tool. Selection tool will let me move these around a little bit. So now you can play with, okay, what are my aesthetics? What do I want that to look like? How do I play with this to make it look a little less crazy and a little more organized? Oops. And this is where things can take a lot longer than you might think for your design. Actually, maybe I'll do that. And I'm going to keep this one. Usually I like my shapes to overlap and jut out. This one I'm going to try and keep contained in the original oval, just for fun, because I can. And maybe that one, oh, fun. I'm going to turn that at a bit of a diagonal and see what happens, and pull that down here, maybe. Ooh, that's starting to be fun. So that looks a little more organized. And I think I want one more, like a little guy over here. That could be fun too. Oops. That could be fun too. Now that starts to look like something I could live with for a pendant or for an earring. And if we pull this over, move this out of the way, over to my my rulers, if you click on your rulers and drag down, you can have a guide. So you can see, judging from your rulers, that this is going to be like 2 inches tall. You can also use your measure tool, which is under the eyedropper tool, measure tool, and you can click and drag and get the length of that, and you can see that the height for that is 2.2 inches. So I was close with my estimation of 2. Now, that'll give us a rough sense of how big that's going to be. You can look at a ruler, make sure that's going to fit. Now, if we just cut this, it would cut on all of our strokes. Now, our strokes would give us like lots of little pieces, and we don't want that. We want to cut the positive space, which is the black, and the negative space, and keep them separated. Okay, so how do we do that? We, first and foremost, are going to take all of these things, and we're going to object, and we're going to rasterize. Rasterize is going to get rid of those paths, and we want to make sure that when we do this, we make the background transparent. This is going to save you some time later. So we hit that, and what we now have is a black and white image, and I'm going to put a box back behind here, rectangle tool, and I want that there. This will make sense in a second. I want to fill that. I'm going to just fill it with random pink so I can see what's going on. And over here in my layers, I'm going to move that underneath my image. So now you can see kind of what's going on. So the pink is only there so that I don't get confused about what's the paper white and what's the object that I'm dealing with. So now when I look at my design that I created, I want to go into Object, Image Trace, and what I want to do is make and expand that. Okay? So make and expand. Now you see the white comes back. Here's the thing. We need to go into the Direct Selection tool, and we only want the parts that are on the black. So I'm going to click off of everything. I'm going to click on just the white part, and I'm going to hit delete. See how that went away? And the only reason we can tell that is because I put the pink back there, so that lets you see what's going on. So again, click on the white, click delete. Do that also for anything that's in interior space, right, that you actually want to have cut out. Because you don't need to cut it twice. If you cut it twice, you might melt your acrylic or burn your wood. 2 laser paths are going to be way more than you need. Oops. And if you need to zoom in, you can do that to see what you're doing so that you can click on the fill and not the stroke. Dum-da-dum-da-dum. And we keep going, and we keep going, and click and delete, click and delete. Okay, things are looking pretty good here. Now when I click on my selection tool, you can see that we have a stroke all the way around. Now, This becomes important when we look up here is that right now we have a fill and no stroke. So the quickest way to switch that is to use this little arrow down here, this little zigzaggy arrow, and that will give you a stroke and no fill. Look at that. Now this, if you've used a laser cutter before, should look familiar. And we know that the only way that's actually going to cut is if we make it 0.001 and hit the tab. Oh, it has to be selected for that to work. There we go. Go in, 0.001. Now, right, there's our stroke, and we know when we click off of that, it's going to be really hard to see, right, because it's super tiny. So we're going to go back and select that again. But that will work for us. Now, if we want 2 of those, right, our best bet over here in our layers, layers are your friend, this whole thing, right, I'm going to click off and I'm going to just select the group that is the earring part, right? Not the background pink, not anything else with the guides, just that. And I'm going to drag it down onto a new layer. It'll be a sublayer. And that'll give me 2 of them. And then if I want to cut them separately, which I do, I'm going to move one of them. Oh, really? Move one of them over onto the side. Ta-da! So now, if I hold the Shift key down and select both, you can see them next to each other. And we don't need the pink anymore. So we can just blink that out. So things are looking pretty good here. Those could be my earrings. That was relatively quick. You would want to put your objects in the corner of your material, fairly close to the edge, right? Not exactly at the edge, but close. You could select this one and use your arrow keys to put them closer together. If you had more that you were, now my suggestion is make one at a time. Make sure you like it and then make more if you want to. But you want to fit them as close as you can in the material that you're working with. And these are the guides that I had to check the height, so I can just blink those out. And now you are ready. Of course, you should have saved a long time ago. To save, earrings 1. You probably want to put your name on it, right? Because it's going to show up. And maybe even do your name first, so that you know it's your file when it comes up on the laser cutter display. And save it as an AI file. Okay, and we're good to go. Now you can grab that, stick it on a flash drive, and put it on the laser cutter, and then we'll talk about materials and settings and how to make sure that's right before you actually cut. Yay!